Hello, I'm Judy Hoffman, member of the League of Women Voters of Evanston, and I'm a resident of the 16th District. I'd like to welcome everyone here on behalf of the sponsors for this evening, which is the League of Women Voters of Evanston, the League of Women Voters of Chicago, and Skokie Public Library. The forum we're presenting this evening is for the primary election race for the Democratic candidate for the 16th State Legislative District and is scheduled to run an hour. A reminder to everyone, of course, to please make sure your electronics are silenced. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. The League of Women Voters works to increase understanding of major policy issues, observes governing bodies, registers voters, and provides information for the voters at election time. The League does not support or oppose any political candidate or party. On behalf of the League, I would like to express our thanks to the administration of the Skokie Public Library for providing this wonderful auditorium tonight, and also for the skilled support staff behind this event. We'd also like to thank our 3 Niles North High School students that are here contributing their very valuable time. Thank you so much. The forum is being filmed and will be available online in a timely manner, probably within a week, and it'll be posted on the League of Women Voters of Evanston website. The website address, URL, is on your program that you picked up at the door. It's nice and short, lwve.org. Election day, as you probably all know, is Tuesday, March 17th, and early voting starts March 2nd. For information on voting locations, sample ballots, and such, you can visit the websites of the suburban Cook County and City of Chicago election authorities, and those website addresses are on the back page of your program. This year, 2020, is the 100th anniversary of the League of Women Voters. The League was officially founded in Chicago in 1920. Just 6 months before the 19th Amendment was ratified, which gave women the right to vote. If you'd like to, thank you. Thank you. If you want to find out more about the League, you can check our website or stop by our table in the lobby after the forum. For all League forums, we engage a moderator that lives outside of the district of the race. So I'll hand the forum over to our moderator from the League of Women Voters of Evanston, Kathy Tate Bradish. Thank you.
Judy. Well, good evening, and thank you so much for so many people coming out on a cold school night and work night to take part in this civic endeavor that we do. So I'll tell you the rules right now, and your candidates have agreed to all of these rules. First of all, and as Judy said, and I think you've seen at the door, please, if anybody has managed to sneak in with a campaign button, take it off. Pretend that this is sort of like a polling place. I used to say when I first started moderating to turn off your pagers, but be sure do one last little check in case you're the tiniest bit nervous. I had my phone ring one time. That was a little bit mortifying. Your candidates are going to have 1.5 minutes each to give an introduction about themselves. Then they'll have 1.5 minutes each to answer questions. All of the candidates will have a chance to answer all of the questions if they wish. They know that they don't have to take the entire 1.5 minutes, which is also 90 seconds, by the way, and we are going to be watching them like hawks. So a reason for some of the formality of a league-style campaign forum is to get as many questions answered as possible in the amount of time that we have. So our timekeepers are down in the front. The nanosecond that it's stop, it's 90 seconds, the sign is going to go up, and they've not done anything wrong yet. If they take a deep breath and we hear a bunch of clauses in their sentence, then I'll be glaring, but they know that they're just going to finish their thought. Did I just get louder? Is this okay. Then also, and this is going to feel a little weird when your favorite person up here gives their opening speech, no applause. No applause. No boos, obviously. No applause through the whole thing. And at the very end, we're going to give the applause because this is not a competition. And as I said, we're going to get as many questions answered as we can. You've had an opportunity to get an index card to write a question on. If something occurs to you and you want a card, put your hand up. If you have written a question, put your hand up with a card. Our card runners will get them, and they're going to go back, and this is truly much more transparent than it seems and not at all secretive, but behind the curtain are the people who are sorting the cards for me because I don't vote in your district. And so they're going to combine things. It has to be the correct level of government. We might all be interested in how they would like to strengthen the NATO alliance, but they don't get to vote on that in Springfield. So we want the right level of government, no personal attacks. It has to be legible. Sometimes they can help you out back there with writing, but I can only read things that come up to me that are legible and capable of being answered by all of the candidates. I then am sort of the last arbiter of which questions get asked because we never get all the questions asked. Your candidates can stay after the forum, and so I urge you to meet them in person. That's one of the great things about local government, and it's one of the great things about coming out on a night like this. You can meet everybody who's running in this Democratic primary. So with no further ado, we're going to start with our opening statements, and Mr. Kalish drew number 1, so he will go first. Timekeepers?
This works. There we go. Usually I don't have have a hard time as a cantor. I usually don't have a hard time having people hear me. But so quickly, I have spent 25 of my 44 years in the 16th district, 10 years living in Skokie, 10 years living in West Rogers Park on Jarlath, and now the last 5 years living in on Fargo in the West Rogers Park neighborhood, together with my wife and 6 children. We have 4 children post-college and 2 children, one in high school and one who's 8 years old. For the last year and a half, for the last year plus, I have been your state representative. I was appointed to replace Lou Wang January 20th of 2019. Since that time, I have been a victims' rights advocate with the passage of my assaulted and arrested bill that protects women who have been victims of crime, and now I am the chief sponsor, filed today, of HB 4788, which is another crime victims bill on behalf of the Illinois Coalition Against Sexual Assault. ICASA has now trusted me with 2 of their most important bills the last 2 years. I brought $3 million of capital improvement into the district. I've worked with our mayors in Skokie and Lincolnwood. I passed an important youth apprenticeship law with Robert Peters to allow youth in care to have costs covered for apprenticeship, and I helped pass the $15 minimum wage, Rebuild Illinois, and the mental health ombudsman. Regarding Rebuild Illinois, Governor Pritzker asked me personally to attend one of his events to promote the Rebuild Illinois, and we brought it right here to
Thank you, Mr. Kalish.
Technology Park. Thank you.
Mr. Olickal.
My name is Kevin Olickal, and I'm running to be your next state representative. The 16th district is where my family laid their roots in this country more than 30 years ago, and they did so to give my brother and I opportunities that they never had. And I think many in this room will understand that immigrant parents do a very good job reminding you how much was sacrificed to get you where you are. And so I have felt this debt that I've needed to repay, and the only way I knew to repay this debt was to commit my career to public service. And this work led me to my job working as Chief of Staff to State Representative Deb Conroy. Led me to work for State Representative Karina Villa, becoming the first Democrat to ever take the 49th District, and most recently serving as the Executive Director to the Indo-American Democratic Organization, an organization committed to making sure minority communities have a voice in their government. I've committed to this work because I found that every day it gets harder for Illinois families to get by. There's higher property taxes, healthcare is more expensive, and corrupt politicians answer to their powerful donors instead of us. This has got to change. I envision a state where families are not forced to choose between paying their bills or putting food on the table. I envision a statewide healthcare system that doesn't leave almost 1 million people uninsured or underinsured. And I envision a future where polluters are held accountable for the climate crisis, not given an invitation to Springfield. That's why we have built this grassroots campaign. We've refused to take money from PACs or lobbyists because I believe this vision and this future is possible. And that's why I'm standing before you today, and I hope to fight for real change.
Thank you. Ms. Stoneback.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Denyse Wang Stoneback, and thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to the Skokie Public Library, and thank you to everyone for coming out this evening. I have actually spent many hours in this library since I grew up here in Skokie, born and raised, went to Middleton, McCracken, graduated from Niles North. I moved away and went to college, but I eventually came back to Skokie to raise my own family here, so my son went to all the same schools. As a former teacher and someone who worked at educational publishing for nearly 2 decades, I value access to quality public education, and I'm honored to say that I've received the endorsement of multiple teachers' unions, including the North Suburban Teachers Union, the Chicago Teachers Union, and the Illinois Federation of Teachers. So it was on one day, December 14th, 2012, I was working on 2nd grade textbooks, that I tuned into the news and heard the news of the Sandy Hook school shooting. And like the rest of our country, I was heartbroken and devastated by this tragedy. I ended up founding a gun violence prevention organization to fight gun violence here in Illinois, in our communities, and we passed landmark laws, passed an assault weapons ban here in Skokie, and we actually had our very first meeting in this very library. So gun safety is also another issue near and dear to my heart, as many other issues are. I would be honored to be your next state representative and represent your priorities for our Illinois state legislature. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Olickal takes the question first. And at any time that you want me to repeat the question, I'm very happy to. How will your top priorities help you reach beyond your key constituents to represent all of us in the Illinois 16th? What issues would you focus on to bring the community together?
So I think one of the biggest issues that we all know as Illinois is there are some serious foundational, fundamental flaws in our democracy when it comes to campaign finance reform, lobbying reform, and ethics reform. And I think that's an issue regardless of party. 80% of people, 90% of people want to see change, because I don't think people believe that regardless of party that their elected officials are actually answering to them. So with all that's going on in Springfield, with legislators being indicted, it's a great time to move on serious campaign finance reform. I think making sure that legislators who sit on committees that oversee industries should be limited in how they get their campaign contributions from those industries. I would like to see a 5-year ban on lobbying to close the revolving door that goes from sitting legislators when legislators are sitting in office for 30+ years and then going to lobby for industries that they were supposed to be holding accountable while they were in office. And so I think if we don't address those issues first, we won't be able to move on all the other policy changes that we want to see.
Thank you. Ms. Stoneback.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. How will your top priorities help you reach beyond your key constituents to represent all of us in the Illinois 16th? What issues would you focus on to bring the community together?
Thank you. Yes, I would certainly, my first and top priority is promoting more gun safety legislation. People in Illinois are dying. It is the one way children in our state are dying, and I think we need to address this. We need to pass better, stronger gun laws, including we need to fix our firearms owner identification card system. There's an estimated 30,000 firearms in the hands of people who should not have them out there, who actually have had their FOID cards revoked. The other issue that I see that's very important to all of our constituents is fully funding education to be able to lower our property taxes. The Illinois fiscal situation has really reached deep into the pockets of working class families. We must pass the fair tax, the progressive income tax, find a wider tax base, increase revenue in our state to fully fund education, and lower our property taxes. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Kalish.
Thank you so much. and picking up on that, knocking on doors as I have been the last several months, I've heard repeated issues. My top priorities of mental health and bringing resources into the district, which is basically why I accepted this position, working with the mayors in the town to make sure that their needs are met in Springfield, is something that obviously affects everyone in the district. But what I hear at the doors is the high cost of prescription drugs, and I sit on the prescription drug committee, which are really out of control. And we need to hold some of our pharmaceutical companies accountable for what they're bringing into this state. We helped pass legislation this past year to cap insulin expenses at $100 a month, and we need to do more to make sure that individuals have the ability to not make the decision whether or not they're going to pay their mortgage or buy prescription drugs. I had a group in my office today. We're working hard to try to come up with answers. Making that decision between mortgage and prescription drugs leads us to our next challenge, which is our real estate and property taxes. Real estate and property taxes, especially in this area, is just out of control. People are making a decision whether or not they can pay their taxes or live in their homes, and it's not a decision they should have to make. We, the state, need to be more involved.
Thank you. Ms. Stoneback takes this question first, and then we're all getting used to the format, and then it will be Mr. Kalish and then Mr. Olickal. So Ms. Stoneback, with regard to health care, we've seen some success this past legislative session in Illinois, but a lack of federal support. What further measures can the state take to improve health care?
I think that the state first needs to, again, generate revenue to fully fund healthcare systems in our state. We should certainly look at providing a Medicaid option on the ACA to make healthcare more affordable for all residents of Illinois until we achieve universal healthcare at the federal level.
Thank you. So I hit that if I'm too loud? How can I tell? Am I okay now? Still a little loud? How's this? How's this? How's this? Okay. Mr. Kalish, same question.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Of course, of course. With regard to health care, we've seen some success this past legislative session in Illinois, but a lack of federal support. What further measures can the state take to improve health care?
I don't think we did enough this past year. There's no question about it. I mean, there are those of us who are fighting for increase in investment in education. One of the slides that I like to pull out is our Center for Tax and Budget Accountability, where our healthcare costs in the year 2000, in the millions was 5 point something billion compared to our healthcare costs in 2020, which is 7.6 billion. But if you figure that out in terms of inflation, we're negative 13.88% between 2000 and 2020. That means we're paying into our healthcare system 13% less today than we did in 2000. That's not a priority that any of us should be proud of. Our priorities have to be that we invest more in our healthcare and we take care of our citizens. The Secretary of Health and Human Services here, has told us how much they want to take care of the sick, but they have to ask for more resources from the legislature, and the legislature has to find more dollars. Passing the fair tax is a good way to start that process, but it's not going to be enough. We're going to need to invest more in our health care.
Thank you. Mr. Olickal.
So I think, one, we need to make sure that the state passes a public option. People need to be buying into our Medicaid system. That'll help generate more revenue. Personally, as someone who's younger and buying private insurance, I'd rather buy into a public option. As someone who's healthier, I would help subsidize the system that exists right now and make sure there's more money to go to people who need the care. When it comes to prescription drugs, I think Representative Will Guzzardi introduced legislation that will not only, like similar to the cap on insulin, would cap the cost of prescription drugs across the board. And I fully intend on co-sponsoring that sort of legislation. When I worked for Representative Deb Conroy, she served as chair of the House Mental Health Committee. And what we found was that even though there are strong parity laws in place, insurance companies who are supposed to be providing coverage for mental health services, since they are supposed to be treated as any other health condition, oftentimes insurance companies are denying claims and coverage over and over again, and people don't know that they have rights. And so we need to empower the insurance department to go after these private insurance companies and make sure they're not denying people who are rightfully paying for their coverage. So stronger parity laws are imperative, and we also need to look at things like our nursing home system. We're in 50th in nursing home care, and I spoke to a nurse in my district, and she told me at times that she's looking after 30 patients in one shift, and that's not okay. We need to make sure that there are nursing patient ratio bills passed to make sure that there are proper staffing ratios in all healthcare systems.
Thank you. Mr. Kalish takes this question first. What is your view on using public funds for private and charter schools? What are your proposed ideas to provide equitable public school funding for children in this district or the state of Illinois? Thank you. Very nice, polite question.
Well, first of all, charter schools are public schools in that regard. They're under the same, a similar funding formula. But what we need to do as it relates to public education, we passed in our last budget, we passed an increase $350 million per law in our public education system. But again, going back to our numbers from before, we are way behind in what we need to invest in public education here in the state. As it relates to the voucher question, the vouchers are irrelevant in the state of Illinois due to the state constitution. So that's not a relevant question for the state. But regarding investment in public education, it's of critical importance that we increase that number without expecting more from our property owners.
Thank you. Mr. Olickal, and let me read the question again. What is your view on using public funds for private and charter schools? What are your proposed ideas to provide equitable public school funding for children in this district or the state of Illinois?
So I don't support private school vouchers, and I don't think charter schools should get $1 of public school funding until neighborhood public schools are fully funded. And I think Representative Wood has already also introduced legislation that will ensure that. So no money is leaving the public school system. Illinois is the 18th largest economy in the world, and the Constitution mandates that we're supposed to be the primary funders of education in the state. But unfortunately, up until 2 years ago, we've been 49th in state funding for public education. We have a poor system. We keep relying on property taxes to pay for public schools, and as a product of Niles North, I'm happy to see, I'm very grateful to have gone through this school system, but this district embodies the disparity and opportunity. In one corner of the district, you have the second highest funded school district in the state. In the other corner, you have kids going to a school district that are spending about half per head per student. And so all the new revenue that's coming in, a huge amount of it should be prioritized for public education. So the fair tax is a good move forward, supporting different sorts of service taxes and cutting down the number. I think Illinois got a C- when it came to giving out subsidies and tax breaks, making sure that no revenue, none of these tax breaks and subsidies are given to corporations. Instead, that money is diverted to public school systems so that we can close that disparity, that gap in educational opportunity.
Thank you. Ms. Stoneback.
Yes, this is a very important question for me. As a former teacher and someone who worked at educational publishing, I care deeply about access to quality public education for every child, and Illinois has a long way to go to fully fund education in our state. Per our Constitution, the state of Illinois should be carrying the burden of public education, and we're not doing that, and that's one of the reasons why our property taxes are high. So we should definitely not be giving public tax dollars to private schools in any way, shape, or form, or expanding any charter school programs. Public schools really need our support at this time. We need to fund them fully, support our teachers, support our children, and improve education in Illinois. This is certainly a priority for me, and as I mentioned before, many teachers' unions are I'm honored to have their endorsement, and I will do everything I can to improve education in Illinois.
Thank you. Mr. Olickal, you take this one. How do we resolve the debt crisis our state faces? That'll be an easy one. 90 seconds. How do we resolve the debt crisis our state faces? Please be specific.
I think 90 seconds is too long, actually. There are two schools of thought when it comes to dealing with debt. There is mitigating spending and prioritizing debt payments, or doing what we can to grow the economy so that our debt payments don't take away from our revenue and away from our public services. I think we need to do both. I think we need to find a way. I know that many people support the re-amortization of debt, which I think is a good idea, depending on what the outcome looks like. I think that we need to make sure that we're investing the revenue that we have now in things that will grow the economy. So making sure that our public schools are fully funded, because unfortunately our tax base is shrinking, and a majority of those people leaving are making under $55,000 a year. These are people who are struggling under the burden of property taxes, local municipal taxes, because the state hasn't been picking up the tab on public services. So making sure that we invest in higher education to keep our students here. We invest in things like clean energy to create job opportunities in the state, and making sure that, and also in addition to making sure that our budget is properly managed and our debt is paid on time, because that's another problem as well. The more and more we pay this debt late, it just adds up interest like a credit card bill. So we have to start acting now.
Thank you. Ms. Stoneback.
Yes, so the first step is to pass the fair tax or the progressive income tax in our state. That will provide tax relief to an estimated 97% of people in Illinois while generating $3.4 billion of estimated revenue. That's the first step. Our tax system is antiquated. We need to modernize it. We have we can also look at refinancing our pension debt. Estimates are if we refinance the debt, we will fund our 5 pensions 70% of the way by fiscal year 2045, and also save $67 billion in pension debt service payments. This is something critical that we have to do to get our state back on track fiscally. I'm also in favor of the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which will generate a projected $30 billion in private investment into our state. It's really important that we start looking and creating a workforce of the future, and this has to do a lot with environmental jobs. We really need to look at this. Also, I would favor looking at taxing services. Illinois currently does not tax any services. We need to widen our tax base in order to create new revenue so that we can fund our core services, healthcare, public education, public safety, and social services.
Thank you. Mr. Kalish.
So we have a structural deficit problem here in the state of Illinois, as you've heard. I'm going to tell you a quick story because I agree with a lot of what you've heard in the previous 2 answers. When the fair tax was introduced, a group of North suburban legislators got together to discuss what our position on the fair tax was going to be because of the challenges we're having with regards to real estate taxes. And one of the legislators suggested that we hold back our support. And I said very firmly that I have no precondition of my support of this fair tax because we need to fix the structural deficit problem that we have here in the state of Illinois. And I was public in my support of the fair tax despite incredible opposition from within the state, from within this district. And for us to pass that fair tax is going to require everyone's assistance to make sure people understand what's at stake, because the fair tax is far from sure from passing. Yes, we sponsored it, we got it through the House, we got it through the Senate, it's on the ballot, we need everyone to vote for it, because that's step number 1. Yes, we need to re-amortize the debt like you've heard, and I am a sponsor of the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which hopefully will bring more business into this state, and thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stoneback, how, as a representative, will you work to take lobbying and/or special interests out of politics?
Yes, so I favor making a law to make sure that sitting legislators are not able to act also as lobbyists while they're in the legislature, and also for a cooling off period of at least 2 years afterwards. I think this is a critical step in making sure that our lawmakers are representing their constituents and not special interests and not profiting on the side. I think that we need wider ethics reform in general. We should definitely make sure that people sitting on certain committees, if they're receiving campaign contributions from people in those industries that should be scrutinized. We really have a long way to go in Illinois to be able to reform this and make sure that special interests and lobbyists are not so influential.
Thank you. Mr. Kalish.
So, lobbying is a form of free speech, and that's really important to understand. And under the ADL and the ACLU and many others, the most important way to combat difficult speech is with more speech. So if we have a challenge with lobbyists or special interests, you have nonprofit groups and you have other groups that I encourage to get involved in their government, like you are today. And this room should even be fuller, because if you really want to take back your government from said lobbyists and interest groups, more people need to be engaged. We're expecting in this election for between 13 to 16,000 people to vote in the primary election. That's out of 108,000 people in this district. When only 16,000 people vote in a given election, then you are handing over the keys to the special interests. You are handing over the keys to lobbyists. Yes, we need to pass meaningful corruption reform in this state. I think we have a governor who spoke about it at length in his State of the State address. Many of us have signed on, including myself, to bills that are important to combating corruption, and I look forward to speaking from experience how important it is to remove this problem from our state government.
Thank you. Mr. Olickal.
I think this is an issue that voters have been talking about for a long time. I think elected officials have been talking about for a long time, but I think it's difficult to move on these issues, especially with how you get into elected office. We're the only campaign in this race that has not taken a dollar from a corporate lobbyist, so when we go down to Springfield, we can fight for lobbying reform right away and not be held back. And we need to do things like limiting how legislators can turn around and lobby. We need to limit how lobbyists can bundle money together. We have an issue. In Illinois, you can sit in the state legislature and lobby in the county. You can sit in the county legislature and lobby for the state. The bar is very, very low for Illinois lobbyists. Even the disclosure laws are very, very antiquated, and there's probably a lot of issues there already. So I think one, it's about making sure that the reason that our lobbyists and special interests have so much influence is how our elections are run. This is the most expensive place to run for state representative. And if we don't address the campaign finance issue, because yes, like Representative Kalish had said, lobbying is free speech, but it's about leveling the playing field. Everybody should have the opportunity to make their case for whatever their issue is, but when you're coming into a room with hundreds of thousands of dollars that you can hand over to candidates, it stifles any ability for real change.
Thank you. Mr. Kalish, you take this first. What is your understanding of the housing need in this district and the state, and what should the state be doing related to affordable housing?
So I've been in touch with a group called the Heartland Organization, who have informed me a lot about the housing challenges that exist in the state. But in this district, I have not seen as much challenge as it relates to affordable housing. I've heard more from individuals who are having a problem staying in their homes. So because of the rising property taxes. So there are affordable housing areas within the district, I believe in the Chicago portion of the district and parts of the Skokie area of the district. But we need to make sure that every person who lives in the state and every person who comes into this district certainly has a roof over their head and a warm place or a cool place, depending on time of year, to sleep at night. So I'm working with the different nonprofit groups that have come to see me in Springfield. I actually had a little house on the house floor. I had a little group of houses on my desk throughout the session to remind me of the need for housing funding here in the state of Illinois.
Thank you. Mr. Olickal.
I think this is an issue that requires a holistic approach. I know some people I personally advocate for lifting the ban on rent control, but I know that doesn't solve our problem. We do need to invest in more public housing, making sure that public housing is sustainable. We need to make sure that developments that take place in neighborhoods are actually driven by the community members themselves and not big developers who are able to make massive contributions to their elected officials. And so I support things like making sure that if we're giving out state subsidies for developments, that community benefit agreements are attached to those subsidies, making sure that the community is is at the table when the developments are being thought out. We also need to make sure that there are a lot of municipalities that don't have requirements for affordable housing whenever there are developments of apartments and condominiums. So there are no requirements to hold 20% to be held for affordable housing. And there's also issues within the voucher system itself. People who have an eviction on their record are not able to get public housing vouchers, and that's really unfortunate because people who do have evictions are often the people who need public housing the most. So there's just we have a very broken system. Even if you are sitting in a eviction court, oftentimes you're not even given, since it's a civil case, you're not given the opportunity to have a public defender, and I think that's another problem in the system as well. So there's a whole host of issues that we can try to fix at the state level.
Thank you. Ms. Stoneback.
I think this is a very important issue, and it's also clearly we need to be able to provide affordable housing, fixed income housing in our district and throughout Illinois, and also lower property taxes so that seniors are able to stay in their homes afterwards. Because of these high property taxes, I've heard over and over at the doors that that seniors may have to leave. I myself, 15 years ago, was a struggling single mom, and I was living in a rental unit in Skokie, and it was difficult sometimes. If my rent were to go up, for example, $100, that would impact my budgeting for that month. And so I do believe that we really need to provide safe, affordable housing in all areas. If you work in an area, you should be able to live in that area. And I've partnered with Open Communities through my nonprofit work, and that is what their philosophy is. I do believe that we all need to remember that that in order to have an enriched, diverse community, a mixed income housing is absolutely the way to go. There are areas of opportunity to provide tax incentives for developers of new and rehabilitated rental units, and I would certainly be in favor of that.
Thank you. Mr. Olickal, you take this one first. 2 murders occurred along Main Street within 1 or 2 blocks of my home and across from a school. What can the state do to reduce crime and protect our children?
I think this is another question that requires a completely holistic approach. We have communities that have been struggling with gun violence for decades. You know, my family moved to Skokie because their house was wrongfully targeted in a drive-by shooting. There are so many communities, and they had the means to leave that community and go to a safer community. There's so many communities and families living in these communities that don't have the means to do so. And that's because these communities don't have economic opportunity. The majority of these shooting victims are kids between the age of 13 and 18. And we need to invest in after-school programs. We need to make sure that kids are in a safe and productive environment. And that also, I mean, there's just so many things that go into this question. And so, yes, we need to make sure that we have stronger and stricter gun laws, making sure that we're tough on gun runners who bring guns from out of state. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we empower the communities themselves. There was a large jump in shootings that took place during the 2-year budget impasse under Bruce Rauner, because programs like Ceasefire, which focus on building those community relationships, lost their funding. And so these people who were going around within the community to stop this violence, all of a sudden they were the first people to lose their funding, and we saw a huge increase in the number of murders taking place. So making sure that these communities have economic opportunity, that the kids can live in safe and productive environments, these are all things that have to go into that question.
Thank you. Ms. Stoneback.
So, as president and founder of a nonprofit to fight gun violence here in Illinois, I'm acutely aware of the gun violence in our Skokie community and our district's communities and in Illinois, throughout Illinois, this is a real, tangible problem that affects all of us. We must address it. People are absolutely dying every single day. People aren't even aware of some of the headlines. And this is something we need to bring to light and we need to tackle. I am definitely in favor of strengthening our gun laws on multiple levels and on continuing to educate the public about gun laws and about the dangers of the easy access and availability of guns. So through my nonprofit, we help stop the largest firearms facility of the entire Midwest from locating right over the border in Niles, a stone's throw away from Niles West High School. Imagine what our communities would have happened in our communities if that had been there 5 years ago. So we need to make sure that people understand the impact of the easy access of guns, and then also strengthen our gun laws. I'm also in favor of really investing in violence prevention programs in underserved areas in our state, so that underserved areas are able to develop economically and socially.
Thank you. Mr. Kalish.
2 shootings on Main Street make its way to our panel, but this is something that happens on a regular basis in different parts of our city. And it's something that should grip us with fear, that people are dying at such an incredible pace in our own city, and we don't do anything about it, and we have to do more. One of the pieces of legislation that I sponsored in Springfield this past year was something called Fix the Floyd. This is the 1-year anniversary of that terrible attack that happened in Aurora that we all read about, right? We need to put a stop to preventable gun violence tragedies in the state. And this piece of legislation will hopefully prevent individuals from being able to access guns to be able to cause damage. We have to block illegal gun ownership. We have to make it harder for people to amass caches of weapons, and we have to make it easier to take them away. And we must enact, if we can, our own automatic weapons ban in this state to make it more difficult for individuals to get access to these weapons to prevent murders that are absolutely happening on a regular basis in this city.
Thank you. Ms. Stoneback, you take this question first. What actions would you support to change the redistricting process in Illinois?
Well, I think this is a complicated question. I think we need redistricting, redistricting on a larger level, but we need to make sure that we have a fair redistricting that represents all ethnicities and races fairly, and we should definitely look at passing a law with an independent commission.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kalish?
So today, to make sure that this League of Women Voters forum was conducted properly, what did we do? We found an individual from outside of our district to come in and moderate this, because she has no horse in the race, so to speak. That's the only way to do this. We have to take a group of individuals from out of this state, from out of every state. Every state should have their own commission going to a different state and saying, okay, you need 108,000 people in a House district. This is your 108,000 people. You need 436,000 people in a congressional district. This is your 436,000 people. Because right now, the process starts in the Senate, and the senators start lobbying for what's going to make things easier for them. Then it goes to the House, and the House members, we're going to start lobbying for what's going to make life easier for us. And then the congressional members start lobbying for what's going to make things easier for them. If there was nobody to talk to but an independent commission, then that's the only way to have fair maps in this state.
Thank you. Mr. Olickal?
I agree with every point that was shared, and I'm 100% in support of independent commission to draw all maps, making sure that every stakeholder within those communities have a voice. It is I've learned a little bit about the map making process. It is very, very complicated. It starts with the census, actually. So we need to make sure that we are doing our part to make sure that everybody in this community, especially this one, which is, I believe that it is one of the most diverse districts in the state. Very hard to count populations. We're doing our part to make sure that everybody participates in the census. And so when that data is good, we'll be able to do a better job of drawing our maps. And that independent commission hopefully is around by then, and they'll be able to do their job well as well.
Thank you. Well, we're almost to that point. We need to wind down. I actually have the last question in my hand. It's another big one. We had lots and lots of fiscal questions, so we have another one. So Mr. Kalish, we start with you, and again, you have 90 seconds. It's going to about take me that long to read the question. So if you want me to do it, read it again, I'll be happy to. Illinois owes over $137 billion in unfunded pension benefits. How did we get to this point? What would you do to stop this debt from increasing? What would you do to reduce it, if not pay it off? Do you believe that the state is responsible for assisting Chicago to solve its pension deficit? You know, I'm in a little executive privilege. You may not need it, but I'm going to give you 2 minutes on this one because it's kind of it's two parts.
Two types of questions. It's not Illinois' job to fix Chicago's problem. Chicago has to fix its own problem, and that's really important. Chicago's a big city, right? You know, like I tell my kids, you're a big boy, right? You fix your problem. We have the state of Illinois that we have to take care of, and it's a big problem. So this is the map, right? This is our unfunded pension liabilities. It got here because there were 10 years of non-payment for a number of reasons, and then we did not pay into our pension obligations. We used our pension obligation money to fund other services for the state of Illinois. And story after story was told to us by Governors Quinn and Blagojevich, as well as others. You know, Governor Edgar created the pension ramp that caused all of our problems. So, you know, we're dealing, and we have our structural deficit challenge that we spoke about in the beginning. So what to do about it? Obviously, we have to pass the fair tax. That's number one. We have to re-amortize the debt. Otherwise, it's going to be every day that we don't re-amortize, every day that we don't refinance this debt, it becomes more unwieldy and more unwieldy and more unwieldy. We have to get it under control. And at that point, when it's under control and when we pass the fair tax, we see what the revenues are as it relates to marijuana. We see what the revenues are as it relates to the additional casino bill that we hope to pass in the next few weeks. Then we can look at the revenues that could possibly come in from CEJA, the Clean Energy Jobs Act, then take a step and figure it out. In my last 15 seconds, I'll tell you that it is the #1 issue that Governor Pritzker is thinking about, and he is talking to us in the legislature on a daily basis.
Thank you. Mr. Olickal.
So with regards to the Chicago question, I mean, Chicago is part of Illinois, and I think that if Chicago has pension problems, it affects all of us. And so figuring out the best way to go about it and making sure that, you know, I know that, for example, the CTU pensions were never being, the state was not doing its part in paying into the CTU pensions, but CTU teachers were paying into the state pensions. So I know they brought those in parity. It's similar to the debt question. You know, there's part of the reason that we have such a huge debt obligation is there was a financial crisis in 2008. Everybody had a pension crisis. And we're not the only state that are struggling with this. And I'll go back to my answer when it comes to the debt. We have to figure out ways to mitigate the costs of our pension, which means re-amortization. How are our pension funds being invested? Are we spending a lot of money on fees going to Wall Street, or are we actually spending money on the actual investment itself? So, you know, I know that you know, we need to make sure Governor Pritzker has talked about the consolidation. There's a lot of bureaucracy in the way pensions are managed in certain municipalities. I think it's $1,400 a year just to manage one pension in a municipality. That's money that should be going to pay down the obligation. Once we deal with that, it goes back to the fact that we do have to grow the economy. So much of our tax revenue is also dependent on the national economy. But we have to do what we can in our state to make sure that we're growing our tax base, we're creating job opportunities, we're keeping people in the state, and that revenue that's supposed to be going to pensions is going to pensions. Because like I said earlier, this is like a credit card bill. The more and more time we spend not paying our pension payments, the interest is just going to accrue, and it's just going to keep eating away at vital public services. So it is another issue that requires a completely holistic approach. It's not, and I'm also upset that we've taken, a lot of people have chosen to vilify teachers and public servants and for committing to public service, knowing that this pension would be a lifeline for them, and it's not fair.
Thank you. Ms. Stoneback.
So I am definitely in favor of fulfilling all of our pension obligations. I think that a promise is a promise. We definitely need to fulfill our obligations and pay our pensions. How did we get to this point was part of that question. And well, from the pension ramp. This goes all the way back to the 90s, and it's been years and years of irresponsible fiscal planning with no actuarial basis. The Center for Tax and Budget Accountability has been making recommendations for years to change Illinois' system from a progressive income tax from a flat income tax system to a progressive income tax. This is the first step. As I mentioned before, it would generate billions of dollars in revenue and actually provide tax relief to 97% of people in Illinois. I think that what we need to do, as I mentioned earlier, is refinance our pension debt. And according to the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability, again, this is going to save us $67 billion and fund our pensions at 70% by fiscal year 2045. This is something we absolutely have to do. In order for us to be able to make those payments in the early years, we can also look at annual pension obligation bonds to generate revenue. We should also be looking for new sources of revenue, and we definitely need to close corporate loopholes and make sure that if people are doing business in Illinois, that they are paying the state of Illinois and that we're able to tax them and generate revenue. There are many things that can be done. Again, I am in favor of looking to widen the environmental opportunities and private investment through the Clean Energy Jobs Act.
Thank you. So now we are in the summation, 90 seconds each. Ms. Stoneback will go first, and then Mr. Kalish, and then Mr. Olickal. Ms. Stoneback.
Thank you. So I just want to summarize and say that last week, many of us were feeling rather hopeless tuning into the national news with the impeachment. And I want to say that we also felt hopeless in 2016, right after the election. It just is incredible what's happening at the national level. And I just want to say, after something like that happens at the national level, I think there's hope, because I saw what happened in 2016. All of these grassroots groups started popping up. People started saying, I've got to get out of my living room chair. I've got to go do something. I need to go to a rally. I need to go to the Women's March. I need to do this. I need to call my legislator and say I want better gun laws, or I want to defend women's reproductive rights. And this made a huge change. We've done so much. We've progressed at the local level and at the state level. And we need to keep this up. I am thrilled to see all of you out here. I hope you continue to get involved. If I'm honored to be your state representative, I will certainly keep fighting for gun safety legislation, fight for women's rights, women's reproductive rights. I'm honored to say that I've been endorsed by Planned Parenthood and Personal PAC and Men for Choice, and also fight for the environment and fully fund education. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kalish.
So I first want to say thank you to Judy Hoffman and the League of Women Voters. Thank you for having us tonight. I also want to thank my campaign manager, Eden, who's here, and Melissa Shakowski, who's my chief of staff, and all of the volunteers who helped me. In November 2018, I voted for Lou Lang, like most of the people here. I did not expect to be sitting here today as your state representative. But as your state representative, I think I have done a tremendous job in bringing resources to this community and representing the community in the best way possible. My goal in year 2 is to pass our mental health ombudsman bill, our crime victim right bill, and education funding that's necessary to keep our public schools and our public universities going at the top level. It's been an honor to serve you, and I think that 17 years of experience in Springfield helps serve you better. And that's what I bring to the table more than anything, the ability to serve you better. We have a great office, and I want to share with you my cell number, 773-234-7900. I am here to serve you, 773-234-7900. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Olickal.
I would also like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this wonderful forum, and thank you to everyone who comes out. It's very difficult as candidates to go out every single day and pitch your message, but it's really great to see so many people participating in their democracy. I think, like Ms. Stoneback said, there's a lot of people have felt frustrated after 2016, and I think this election is a culmination of a lot of that energy and concern. And I think at every level of the ticket, you have a couple of choices. You have a choice to enable the status quo. You have to go back to support candidates who have kind of not really changed, or I think we have an opportunity at every layer of the ticket to fight for grassroots change, and that's why I'm here. I'm in this race because I want to make sure that I go down to Springfield and I'm only accountable to people like you. This district has given me so much was sacrificed to get me here in front of you today, and I want to make sure that the next generation of kids have all the same opportunities that I did. And we're doing that by building a grassroots movement, not taking a dollar from special interests, not taking a dollar from lobbyists, because I want to fight relentlessly for all of you and no one else. And so I think this election is about putting power back into the hands of the people, and I hope that you get involved and make sure that change happens. Regardless of who your candidate is, get involved, go knock on some doors for them, get invested in this race. This election will have repercussions that will go on for decades, so thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Olickal. So now I'd like everybody to hang on. I've timed this beautifully. We're going to be out the door by 7:30, but I have some thank yous. So first of all, would our 3 candidates please stand up? Could we have a huge round of applause? Thank you. Okay, have a seat. All right, I have to say something. It was delightful for me to be here tonight. I am envious of you in your district here. You have passionate candidates who clearly have been doing their homework in the district, who care about the issues. But in addition to that, as we all know, in 2020 and 2018 and 2016 and going back 2010 and earlier, this is a very, very difficult political climate to put your neck out there and run for office. So you guys can stay seated, but I'd like one more round of applause because they have put it out there. Okay, thank you. Now I'd actually like the audience to stand. Stand up and give yourselves a round of applause, and I'll tell you why. And don't use this as an excuse to sneak out either. I'm not quite done. So have a seat. Thank you so much. You know, we talk a lot about civics and civic engagement and how do we get people more involved, and you've done it. It's a school night, it's a work night. You're here. You see the value of meeting your local candidates, and also I hope you understand how much more closely local candidates can actually touch your lives than some of the national candidates. So thank you so much for coming out. And then I would like all of the League of Women Voters volunteers, and those of you behind the curtain, if you want to, we'd love to have you come out, and also our high school students to stand up, please. Come on down, you guys. So I have a really long list here, so go ahead and have a seat. I want to tell you thank you so much. So these were the people hiding in the back, bringing me questions, crossing things out, making sure they were legible. That nice little thank you, though, came directly from somebody in the audience. They don't thank me for reading questions. So I want you to listen to this list, because you came here, and obviously you're appreciative of what happened. But in particular, Judy, just raise your hand, would you? In particular, in the person of Judy Hoffman, but a very big committee from the League of Women Voters of Evanston, which also covers Skokie. They got the candidates to agree to come tonight, all of them at the same time. They arranged the venue. They got the cards. They got the pencils. They brought the time cards. They brought the stopwatch. Then they got people to agree to be timekeepers, to be card sorters, to be card runners. Those are the people who bring the stuff up to us. To make the program, which I'm going to talk to you, to make the name tents. I have shown up at debates where I'm moderating and I'm pulling paper out of my bag to make name tents because the group that I was working for didn't know to do it. Brought a moderator in, right? Was I available for today? It's a zero waste event. Did you notice? No plastic bottles, because League of Women Voters doesn't believe in that. So we've got mugs and water pitchers instead. And remember that the League of Women Voters of Evanston Skokie is a membership organization. And if you are worried about civic engagement and civic education with our high school students here tonight, there is no better way than to be involved with the League, but also no better way than to show up for something like a Monday night debate, right? The full video, it's a wonderful program, by the way, and there's lots of information on both sides, so don't just drop it or shove it in your pocket and find it again next fall. LWVE, standing for League of Women Voters of Evanston.org, in about a week, check back and you'll have the full video. Please tell your friends about it and share it on social media if that is something that you do. Judy told you, but the primary election is March 17. Early voting starts March 2nd. Absolutely every single question I'm telling you that you could possibly have about the election, are you registered, where do you vote, who are the candidates, is at the bottom of the back side of this page, or you can call Mr. Kalish if you wrote his phone number down. All of the candidates have materials in the vestibule for you, as does the League of Women Voters. Please give the pencils back. We have to buy them every time we do a new forum. And friends, do not let friends stay home on election day. So now, of course, there's early voting, but if you know someone who votes on the day and needs a ride, please offer it. And thank you, everyone, for coming out. It was a delightful evening for me. I hope you learned something.